in Tokyo Olympic Management Committee, we have been reporting to the IOC in terms of the vaccinations playbooks and also the COVID-19 emergency situation treatment. IOC's feedback that although it is going to be a very challenging game, but they think Japan is very well prepared, and we are moving toward a game of safety and security. And we have got the support, and we have got the recognitions from so many different institutions. From the IOC's perspective, all the procedures of the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Game and Paralympic Game has been progressing very smoothly. And I also believe on the 10th of the June, we are going to officially start the boxing game, which is the play of the Olympic game, and that is going to be a very strong induction toward all of us. In terms of vaccinations, we have injected around 80% of the athletes, and that is also in line with the IOC's requirement. In terms of the Japanese volunteers and also Japanese staff, they are also going to give you a very important games of the safety and security. I believe that yesterday we have held process about the opinions toward how do we inject the vaccines to the Japanese athletes, and the Japanese friends from Japanese media has also asked us how do we inject the visitors to Japan, and we are continue our discussion with the IOCs. And at the same time, we also trying to came up with several different plans to make sure that the international media who is coming to Japan is going to be vaccinated. And we also want to make this Olympic with cyber security. So until now, we will continue our discussions with the IOC and our government to make sure that all the preparation is very well prepared, and we are going to adopt a holistic approach toward any incident that might happen. I think every single Olympic game is a very important opportunity for the athletes. The athletes is going to prepare all of them until the last moment. Olympic game is of the ultimate importance to the athletes. I have fully understand that importance. Until now, we have went through all kinds of difficulties, ups and downs. We are not getting the support from IOC. We also getting the support from NOC, which is an association of the doctors. And we have also got some of the international support. We believe that we are trying our best to collecting some of the evidence to make sure that the Olympic game is going to be very well progressed, and it is 44 days before the openings of the Olympic Games, and we have been talking to many stakeholders to make sure that this is going to be a game of safety and security, and I believe it is going to be a game connecting all the stakeholders. That is my report. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, President Hashimoto. Now the floor is open up for questions. So I believe that we are going to answer the questions from the journalist at the site, and later on we are going to answer the questions from online. So the floor is open up for questions. I am from the Radio of France. My question is about the GPS activities for the foreign visitors to Japan. Yesterday, during the press, the president of the Hashimoto has mentioned about the attachment of the GPS. So we are not very sure about the functions of the GPS and how do we attach the GPS and how do we progress the data of the GPS to the center and how do we make sure that every details of the GPS. That's the reason why we need to reconfirm with you once again. So if there is, for example, if the journalist from other international media has moved to some of the places that is outside of the requirement, how do we respond to that? I think the GPS is not only limited to the friends from the media, but it is also going to be expanded for all the foreign visitors. That is how I reported to all of you. And based on the current situations, I believe definitely they are going to went to the different spots. And these are all the measures to deal with COVID-19. Definitely, when they enter into the border of Japan, we are going to let the Office of the Information to manage that installations of the GPS. I think sometimes we are going to combine the GPS function together with the GPS functions on their smartphones. So that is how we are going to abide by the playbook of the IOC and the NOC. And I believe if you have read the playbook, you are going to understand it naturally. It is not for the purpose of the observations or monitoring. If there's any problems in terms of their activity, I think if there is any breakdowns of the GPS, as long as the journalist can prove where they have been, or as long as they can prove where they can be, so it also works. So I think we don't have a very strict requirement toward the functions of the GPS. Saito with Asahi News. My question is about the vaccination. In the recent few days, we have started the vaccination campaign toward the volunteers. So when we were vaccinated, those volunteers, did we get the support from IOCs? And can you brief us the latest update of the vaccination procedure? So among those of the relevant parties who have been vaccinated or inoculated, there is currently 20,000 people. Definitely, we include the athletes, media, journalists, and also the volunteers. I think we are moving toward some of the staffs who should be inoculated. And we are still considering whether this proportion or whether this part of the staff should be inoculated or not. We are working together with IOC, since we are also exchanging opinions with IOC. Definitely, we are adopting a very forward-looking attitude, but we have not decided about that yet. Since if we can have some of the accurate data, definitely we are going to send it to the media and then we are going to proceed other preparational procedures. So the vaccination result, is it under the joint effort between ROC or between the ROC and the government? I think the organizing committees and also the GOC has signed up some of the contract to make sure all the relevant parties is going to be vaccinated, but actually those who is responsible is the country and the government. Our prime minister is also working to help us. That is how we get what we have today. Thank you. So I'm Sasaki with Japanese news. So my question is also about the GPS. Since you have been talking about the GPS, so we need to reconfirm that it is not for the monitoring purpose. So what kind of scenario that the journalist can give up the GPS monitoring? So we are trying to regulate the activities of them. It is not monitoring every single movement of that people. We are setting up this rule to deal with those who entered into the border of Japan. Definitely, we have put the principle of trusting each other and believing each other first. And if there is any accident, the GPS positioning is definitely going to help us. And it is going to help us to accurately state our position and help us to get more information. That is what we are. That is the logic behind the GPS policy. Harada with Tokyo News. So I think, as IOC has mentioned, that it is going to be a very challenging event, and we are also using the word challenging in the Japanese. So under what context did IOC came out with the word of the challenging? So can you give us more background information? Not only President Bach from IOC, I could see a lot of journalists is also came up with the same measure, same comment. That is to say, it is going to be a very difficult situation, and despite the difficulties, we are treating everything properly. That is the background information. We are working against the COVID-19 pandemic, but we are trying to implement all the measures during the preparational procedure. That is the background information. Although the IOC has already used the word of the challenging, to put it into Japanese, it should means that we have met a lot of difficulties, but we overcome all of these difficulties. So Matsuyama with NHK. The question is also about the vaccinations of the relevant parties. Recently, we heard that the Minister Maruyama has mentioned that all the volunteers should be vaccinated. And also, the media workers should also be vaccinated. So can you give us more information about that front? So our prerequisite condition is that after you are being vaccinated, the general social contact is not going to spread the disease. I hope that Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games and Paralympic Games is going to become one of the major national events. We hope to gain the support and understanding across the country, and we hope that we are seeing a very positive attitude from IOC. And for the vaccinations of the IOC, that's the reason. Since we want to make sure that all the Japanese people should be reassured about the safeties, that's the reason why we accepted the vaccination requirement of the IOC. So we are going to continue the journey to make the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games of the safety and security. That's the reason why we are preparing that all the relevant parties should be vaccinated and inoculated. That is the logic behind our thinking. Thank you. So I am Kinoshita with Japanese sports. So during the visit of the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games, we hope that all the athletes could stay at their own homes. So do we have any requirement for the athletes who's coming to Japan? For the management of the athletes, we have not decided yet. I think this item is going to be decided in the middle of this month. Since we are still in the middle of a state emergency, there's not so much people on the street. And we should also make this one part of the national rules. And I believe that we should follow the requirement of the national announcement of a state of the emergency. And if we closed that declaration of the national emergency, what kind of situation it is going to be, we are not quite sure yet. Definitely, when the athlete is coming to Japan, we need to treat the athletes and we need to think about the concrete measures. Definitely, we are not going to have a main dining room. We believe all the athletes is going to take the food away to eat it in their own apartment. But these measures is going to be decided in the middle of this month. I think the room of the athletes is very helpful, and because all the athletes is basically going to stay at the hotel. I think if we forbid the athletes to go to other different places, it is going to be very difficult for all of us. That is the reason why we need the support from the Japanese government, but we have not decided yet. So we are still need more discussions about that. So this is an online question with BBC from Roman Lamont. This is a question about the special sports, including swimming, which means the close contact between each other. Definitely, we could see the swimmers from all the different countries is going to have a close contact with each other. How do we avoid such close contact? You mentioned about the mutation of COVID-19 virus from India. We are definitely going to extend the observation period. I think this is going to be decided at the end of this month. And if anything happens, if some of the athletes from a certain country cannot be participating in this year's Olympic Games, it is going to be a regret for the athletes themselves and for the government, the IOC, and also DOC. We are going to discuss about how do we deal with that. Thank you very much. The next question is coming from the Deutsche News. It is a question about the GPS attached on the smartphones. do we have any requirement toward the athletes to attach the GPS tracker on their smartphones? Yes, all the overseas visitors to Japan is going to make sure that the GPS tracker is going to be attached on their smartphones. That is my understanding. So the athletes who are coming from other different countries, later on we are going to reconfirm with that item. Just as I have mentioned, this is a question from the Madam of the Australians from CNN. Definitely, all the overseas media is going to see the GPS tracker attached on their smartphones. And so the question from CNN is that is the local media, or the staff of the local media, also going to be vaccinated and inoculated? I think from today, all the media workers who is responsible for the report of the Olympic game is going to be inoculated. For us, we have adopted a plus alpha vaccination, and we are actually inducted on the volunteers. Definitely, it is a very difficult job to include all the volunteers, but I think that I am going to report to IOC and discuss whether the media workers from Japan is going to be inoculated. The final question is coming from Mr. Bing. This is a question about the volunteers. And he also wants to reconfirm that if we inoculated all the volunteers, if we don't inoculate all the volunteers, how do you make sure that the Tokyo 2020 Olympic game is going to be a game with safety and security? So whether we are going to inject all the volunteers has not been decided yet. Definitely, there are some of the volunteers who have a very frequent close contact with the athletes, but we should not think about the athletes. Definitely, there are some of the volunteers who is going to be getting a very close contact with the political celebrities, those heads of the states who are also attending the opening ceremony. At that time, which part of the volunteer group should receive the vaccination? I think that we should divide the volunteers into different groups. So if you ask me about this question, and if we have any circumstances, I think if the volunteers is demonstrating some of the symptoms, we are going to start the inoculations of the volunteers one by one, and the first step that we are going to make. Let me give you an example that if there are some of the volunteers who is going to be providing volunteer service to the political heads of the states, definitely they are going to be inoculated. Thank you very much. I believe that we have all answered all the questions. For those who entered into Japan, they should supply their previous activities 10 days before their entrance into the Japan. And we are also going to attach the GPS tracker on them, no matter for the athletes or the media. we are going to conclude today's presser. Thank you very much for your participation in today's presser.